So, I mean, even if you were to try to call this a self-fulfilling prophecy, it still happened, right? So he had to convince a bunch of Jewish people that he was the God of the Old Testament, convince them to follow him after his death, and then the Jewish nation as a whole, though, had to reject him, and then the whole rest of the world had to accept him while they remained in obstinate disbelief. So this is like incredibly specific. And there's the manger. This is fulfilled when Jesus was born. Little baby Jesus right there. I've got 4 kids, and so like I love playing with my kids, taking them to the park, running around, doing all those things. And honestly, I've always kind of wondered what it would have been like to play with baby Jesus, you know? Like when he was like 3 or 4, like kind of running around, I always thought like, man, that's crazy that somebody probably did that. So, Jesus, I think he deserves to be a much larger font than all the other ones. Amen. Oh, and also I'd like to thank my wife Sarah for making this timeline. She is like phenomenal with all this stuff. She made this whole PowerPoint. And when you see the emails come in, like a lot of times it's at 2 o'clock in the morning. Well, that's because like Sarah and I are sitting on the couch and she's helping me edit because I'm like terrible with grammar and trying to organize information in a way that's like, you know, comprehensible to other people. So I'm good at storing the information, but Sarah's good at outlining it in a way that people can actually comprehend.
Cool.
So she just does a phenomenal job. Okay, so this prophecy is really incredible. So this is found in Isaiah chapter 8. And so this actually comes after the promise that Assyria is going to be like, like water that sweeps across and suddenly reaches to the neck. Well, then Isaiah goes on to say that Isaiah warns us not to listen to the Jewish people when they say a conspiracy has taken place, because God will become something that the Jewish people will have stumbled over. So it states the following. For the Lord spoke thus to me with a strong hand upon me and warned me not to walk in the way of this people, saying, do not call conspiracy all that this people calls conspiracy, and do not fear what they fear, nor be in dread. But the Lord of hosts, him you shall honor as holy, let him be your fear, and let him be your dread. And he will become a sanctuary and a stone of offense and a rock of stumbling to both houses of Israel, a trap and a snare to the inhabitants of Jerusalem, and many shall stumble on it. They shall be fall and be broken, they shall be snared and taken. Okay, so now we have a Jewish prophet writing in the 8th century BC, and he's saying, whatever you guys do, don't listen to us. Because we're going to say that a conspiracy has taken place, but don't believe them, because God has actually become something that has become an object of sin for the Jewish people. Okay, so and this is found in the context of that vision about God coming to earth in human form. So on bookends on either side of this, you have the child will be called Emmanuel in chapter 7, and then the child who brings glory to Galilee and is called Mighty God in chapter 9. Well, so this kind of is found right in the middle of the context of that vision, and he's saying when God comes to earth in human form, the Jewish people are going to say that a conspiracy has been committed, but don't listen to them because it was actually God. And this to me is just it's just incredible, because like, do you ever find any other religious movement that says like, hey guys, don't listen to us? Because this God that we worship, right? This God that we worship, we're going to reject him, and it's going to be an object of sin for us. Okay, so this was fulfilled from 33 AD through the day of the Lord. So this is going to be in perpetuity until Jesus returns. When the Jewish people, and with the Jewish people calling the resurrection a conspiracy and denying the Trinity. Okay, this is point number 9 there. Okay. So now they're saying God didn't come to earth. That was a conspiracy. People made up the resurrection, right? So we know in Matthew 28 when they say like they paid off those guards to say, oh, the disciples stole the body. Right there, they're calling it a conspiracy. And it's actually interesting because in the Jewish Talmud, it doesn't ever say that Jesus didn't exist. It doesn't say that he didn't have a ministry. It says that he was a sorcerer, right? And it says that the disciples made up the resurrection. So, in intricate detail. And this is a Jewish prophet saying this. Okay, so now we're moving a little ways forward through history, and it states that after the Messiah, the Jewish people will be exiled across the earth, and then once the nations of the world have accepted him, the Jewish people will be returned to their land. This is found in Isaiah chapter 11. And so it says, there shall come forth a shoot from the stump of Jesse, and a branch from his roots will bear fruit. So bearing fruit is like the fruit of the Spirit. Goes on, and so it makes a millennial promise after that, just saying that like after, this is what's going to happen as a result of the coming of the Messiah. And it says, in that day the root of Jesse, who shall stand as a signal for the peoples, of him shall the nations inquire, and his resting place shall be glorious. So now, notice that this Messiah character, he's both the branch from the root of Jesse, but he's also the root of Jesse. In the same way that he's the son of David, but also the Lord of David in Psalm 110. So now, once the Messiah comes and the nations are inquiring of this Messiah character, right, and this is immediately following the God is coming to earth in human form, the Jewish people are going to say conspiracy has been committed, then it says this indicates that they'll be exiled across the earth, because he says after the Messiah, when the nations are inquiring of him, then God will raise a signal for the nations and will assemble the banished of Israel and gather the dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth. So now the Jewish people are scattered across the earth in 70 AD, well, really between 70 and 132 AD with like the Bar Kokhba rebellion and the Roman Jewish wars. So they end up getting kicked out of the land, exiled across the entire earth. The word of God goes out from Jerusalem, spreads across the world, exactly as predicted in Isaiah. And then after people and nations across the whole rest of the world are accepting this Messiah character, then the Jewish people are returned from exile. So now the Jewish people are punished by exile for idolatry, right? So the first exile was as a result of polytheistic idolatry, where they would worship, gods of wood and stone, like Baal and things like that. Well, this one was because of failing to worship Jesus and the triune God incarnate that was revealed in the New Testament, right? So now they're committing idolatry then by worshiping multiple gods, and then now they're failing to worship the God as he's revealed, the God he's actually revealed himself to be in the person of Christ. So this was fulfilled May 14th, 1948 by UN decree, which again is an outside agency. This is following World War II, and they all agreed that Israel needed to have a homeland so that they could defend themselves. So now this is an outside agency with no interest in fulfilling prophecy, a Jewish prophet's words, saying that Israel needs to come back, right? So this is all set off by a Gentile king, right, basically Hitler, who has just a horrible hatred of the Jewish people. So now this is really amazing because these are all outside agencies that are bringing this all to pass. So now there's this really fascinating prophecy in Isaiah chapter 65 where God says that I'm going to bring you guys back into Judah, right? I'm going to bring you back from this from the global exile. But he says that I'm going to bow you down to the slaughter. There's going to be this horrible persecution and a time of bereavement for you. And he says during that time there's going to be a group of people who are actually the servants of God. So he's saying, my servants I shall call by a new name. Right? He says this in Isaiah chapter 65. So again, a Jewish prophet saying that the actual people of God, the actual true servants of God, are going to be called something other than the Jewish people. And so naturally that's Christians. Now that relates to the new name prophecy also in Isaiah, I think it's 42, and then also in Amos 9, where he says that God says he's going to rebuild the booth of David, and then and it says that the Gentile nations will be called by the name of God. Well, this indicates that it's going to be a new name, and that name is Christ. So then also in Isaiah 66, indicates that this is going to take place in one day. So how does a nation regather in one day? By political decree. This is point number 9. Or no, sorry. Yeah, point number 10. Okay, so this last prophetic message indicates that the Jewish people will go to war with Edom, Moab, and Ammon, which is modern-day Jordan, and win, and a foreign people will remain in ancient Philistia, which is modern-day Gaza. And the prophecy is found in Isaiah chapter 11, and it states the following. Speaking of the Jewish people, but they shall swoop down on the shoulder of the Philistines in the west, and together they shall plunder the people of the east. They shall put out their hand against Edom and Moab, and the Ammonites shall obey them. So when it says put out their hand against, it means they're going to engage in conflict with. And then when it says that they'll obey them, it means that they'll win. So this was fulfilled in 1967 when the Jewish people fought the 6-day war against Jordan and reclaimed it as Jewish territory. Okay, so, and also ancient Philistia is Gaza, so we have a foreign people still dwelling. And so when it says to the west, it means west of Jerusalem, because all these prophecies are centered around Jerusalem. That's considered like the head of Israel. And so we have foreign people dwelling in Gaza, and we have them going to war with Jordan and reclaiming the territory, exactly like it states. And so this actually ended up dealing a severe financial blow to Jordan because their control of Jerusalem brought them like a lot of financial prosperity. And so this ended up, just like the prophecy said, that it's plundering the people of the east. So not only did losing Jerusalem deal a severe financial blow to Jordan, but also the Palestinians who ended up being exiled from the land caused a huge financial crisis for like Syria and all the other nations east of Israel. So here you see Jordan. This is prior to the 6-day war, where that West Bank area, so Ammon, Moab, and Edom, and it's modern-day Jordan. And then after the 6-day war, it's Jewish territory. Okay, so this is not even all the prophecies to be found in Isaiah, just chapters 1 through 39. Right? So just using the evidence that the hardest atheist apologists will grant, we can prove the Bible to be divinely inspired without question. So we also, in chapter 23, have the fall of Tyre, elimination of the Moabites from history in Isaiah 15, oracle against Egypt, the exile of the people of Syria, Damascus becoming a heap of ruins, the Nile drying up after the return from global exile, which is happening currently, and also the fact that Jerusalem is considered the most holy city in the world in Isaiah chapter 2. And so while that, I think, is talking really about the time after the return of the Messiah, like we still have like about 2/3 of humanity considering Jerusalem like the holiest city in the world. Right? So like people go there, it says that all nations will flow to it to seek the God of Jacob. And so even though we all have different opinions on, so Christians, Jewish people, and even those of Islam believe that they're worshiping the God of the Old Testament. Now obviously we believe that we are worshiping God in truth through the person of Christ. But even they believe that they are properly worshiping the God of the Old Testament, so they're all calling upon the name of Jacob and going to Jerusalem to do that. Okay, so if you look at the arguments that are actually posed against Isaiah 40 through 66, what you'll find is that they're almost always based on circular reasoning. So it'll say like, oh, well, in Isaiah chapter 40, it states, it describes this certain event in history. Well, that event didn't happen until, 400 whatever BC, so it must have been written after that. And when you go through their arguments, every single time, it'll suggest that over and over and over and over again. They'll call it like the Deutero or Trito-Isaiah theory. And so they'll just assume that the person, that any of the authors, but specifically Isaiah, receiving the information from a mind outside of time is not a possibility in advance. They just rule out that possibility and say, the fact that this information is present indicates that it was written after it took place. And then the other thing is that there'll be like, they'll say that the switching of time perspectives, so they'll say like, oh, well, it talks about a temple that's already been rebuilt in chapters 50 through 66, or a temple that's already been destroyed in 40 through 55. I'm sorry, yeah, 40 through 55, a temple that's already been destroyed, and then 55 through 66, a temple that's already been rebuilt. And so that switching of time perspective, since it's like kind of speaking as though it's a present reality, they'll say that indicates that this must have been written after that. But the reality of the situation is that Babylon cannot be a bare ruin and the glory of kingdoms at the same time. So there's multiple examples within the first 39 chapters of Isaiah that do indicate a switching of time perspective, where it'll talk about something as though it's a present reality, because God is speaking to the people who are living at the time that it's going to happen. So when he says Babylon, the glory of kingdoms, he's saying the Medes are going to fall at this future time, right? So this is exactly what we should expect if the information is coming from a mind outside of time, right? So God is clearly revealing himself in all this. So I know this is probably kind of a lot of information, like really fast, but I really wanted you guys to see that the amazing fulfillment of all these prophecies as it marches through history. And we obviously have an example of a man receiving information from a mind outside of time. And the only mind that exists outside of time is our Lord and Savior. Thank you all.
Amen.
We have like cookies and chips and stuff. You guys want to take a little break? Then we'll get started after the witness.
The only line that exists outside of time and place is that.
Still see it.
Is that.